Welcome to part 2 of the video build log for the Dynam Tempest. We've got the sub-assemblies all together, and in this part we'll mount it all to the fuselage and install the electronics. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide the horizontal stabilizer and the vertical stabilizer together. Now that's really a simple process. You're just going to line it up and push the pieces together. We're not going to use any glue in this case because it all bolts onto the back of the fuselage. And there you have it. There's nothing to that. Just make sure that you've got it all lined up. Obviously it's not going to fit if the elevators are forward, and so that's the piece that we're going to be installing in just a second to the back of the airplane. Now the empennage bolts on the back, or in this case screws on the back, with these little screws here. They're pretty obvious. They've got a little bit broader thread pattern, and they're pointy. So they're in the kit, and that's how they're going to come in. They're going to come in up through the bottom. Let me show you. I'll place the empennage on there. Now you notice there's a place in the back over here. Let me rotate that for you right here, where there's a groove and there's a tongue on the rudder, and you're going to slide that in there to give the rudder a little extra support. And so we'll slide that down through there while making sure that the front tab here gets placed in there, and squeeze that all together. So now we've got the put on there nice and with good alignment. Now we're just going to rotate it, and we're going to use these screws. So we're going to drop one in each of the holes at the bottom. Now these are pretty deep holes, I discovered when doing some dry fitting, and so I've gotten a larger screwdriver from my workshop to get down in there. The little one that came with the kit is way too short. Go after the other one. Sometimes you have to mess with these a little bit, obviously to find the pattern in the screw, and then for the screw to find the connector there in the model. So don't be too frustrated if you have to mess with this a little bit. It's not uncommon for that to happen. Okay? Again, you're screwing into plastic, and so don't get carried away with tightening it down. You want it to be firm. You certainly don't want the tail rattling around, but you also don't want to strip the plastic receiver that's in the horizontal stabilizer. Now there's one more thing that we're going to have to do here at the bottom of the airplane, and that's to mount the tail wheel. Now the tail wheel comes all assembled, and it's got a little flat piece along that vertical part of its support, and that's where this little grub screw that's mounted in this collet is going to go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the grub screw out using the Allen wrench or the hex key that came with the kit, and I'm going to put a drop of thread locker on it so that doesn't vibrate out when I'm flying it and then I lose my tail wheel. I've got some of the little blue colored, it comes in a red bottle, but it's blue colored thread lock, and that's a fairly low temperature thread lock, so I'll be able to get it out if I need to. Got it started back in there. Put the tail wheel in so the flat piece is where that grub screw is going to come through. Snug it up, and we're good to go. Next, we need to attach the pushrod clevises. Now I've got this zoomed in here on the clevises and the control horn, in this case for the elevator. Now as you can see, these just spread apart, and then you push them through the hole, and I'm going to use the outer hole in the control horn. I can change the holes later if I discover that I don't have enough control deflection or control movement per the instructions. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little pin here through the hole, but I'm not going to snap it together. That's because I haven't powered up the servos. I anticipate them to be centered, but if they're not, then it's going to be just a simple matter of spreading the clevis out, pulling the pin out, and then this is adjustable by turning it. It's, you know, old righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You turn it right, it's going to extend, left, it's going to go back in, or the other way around. But in any case, you can move this back and forth to get alignment. Now, I've checked this, and in this case, this just happens to be perfectly aligned. So all I'm going to need to do is spread the clevis apart a little bit, use my fingers for that, and then slide that little tab into the hole right there, and now they're connected. Now again, I'm not going to snap it in case I have to adjust it, and after I've got the it aligned as best I can mechanically, I can use my radio sub trims, and when I've got all that done, then I'm going to come back here and snap it, and then I'm also going to put a 4-inch cable tie around that to hold it tight. Some guys like to slide a piece of fuel tubing over it, but whatever your technique, you're going to want to put something to bind that together, because you can see it's just a little snap, a little nub, and something as important as the elevator you wouldn't want to lose control of. Let's take a look at the rudder now. Now with the rudder, you can see what I was talking about, because you can see that the clevis and the control horn are a little ways apart. And if I were to bend the rudder over to the clevis, I'd induce a lot of yaw into the airplane. And so in this case, I'm just going to use a needle nose pliers here, get it for you, and I'm going to hold the control rod so I'm not putting pressure on the servo connector back in the cockpit, and then I'm just going to use my fingers and twist the clevis out so that I can get as straight an alignment I can mechanically using the threads along the control rod. So let me do that now. Now I've got this twisted out, well, about 4 or 5 turns to get it to align, and in this case, as it comes out of the fuselage, it's more aligned to the inside or the center hole, and so I'm going to do that. You always want some effective rudder, especially with a tail dragger, so having a larger control throws there on the rudder is not going to be a bad thing. So again, I'm just going to spread that open. And drop it through the hole. Now the next big part of the assembly is to mount the wings. Now I've mounted the Y cords that came with the kit to the respectively labeled connectors here at the wings. Remember, we had them taped in when we put the wings together. So I've got the gear Y cord connected to the 2 gear, and then the ailerons connected to the 2 ailerons. Now remember, with these you can change colors sometimes, and the gear, for example, do, but in this case the darkest color is always the negative and the lightest color is always the signal. So whether it's the brown, red, and orange, or the black, red, and white, you'll know how to put those together. Also, if you're planning to use a 6-channel radio so that you're putting ailerons one on each channel and mixing them in the transmitter, you won't want to use the Y cord. You'll want to use extenders to get them into the cockpit. I'm planning to use one of those 3D stabilizers or 3-axis stabilizers, so I'm going to use the aileron Y cord in this case. Now the hole for the wires to go through into the cockpit are right here, so this should go together pretty well. So the wing is going to block it when I do it, but I'll just drop those Y cords through there, and then you may notice a little bit of blue right here. That's some painter's tape wrapped around the wires from the LEDs that I do not plan to use. So let's get this in there. Now I've got the servo wires pulled through in the hole, and the wing just simply mounts with these large nylon wing bolts. And so we'll drop those into the sleeves and screw them on tight. And there we have it. We've got the major assemblies all put on. It's looking pretty good. Let's zoom out, flip it over, put the cockpit on. You get a chance to see what this baby looks like. Our model's starting to look pretty good, not too bad at all. We'll put the propeller and the spinner on after we've got everything wired up, which is the next step, and then we'll finish with some small plastic parts that frankly I didn't want to knock off while I was busy working on some of the other parts of the assembly. Now there's just a couple of things left to do. One of those is to put in the plastic parts. The instructions had them installed early in the assembly, but they just seem to be a real likely candidate to be knocked off, so I've saved them for the end. And that involves the cannons and the wings. And so in this case we're just going to put a little glue, kit glue again, on this little piece of tube, and then just kind of stick it in the hole. Kind of twist it as it goes in so that the glue goes in with it and then covers the foam on the inside. And in this case the stops in the molding are at different lengths, and so the airplane had cannons, or had at least the potential to have cannons that were different lengths. They had two different barrel versions of these cannons, and so this model has a short barrel and a long barrel. And so this one on the outside hole doesn't go in as far. So you can see there we've got a short one and a long one. And then the other thing is, in one of those first steps it had this just a small part. It says glue the plastic part, and basically I think what this is, it looks like it's a pitot tube out there on the wing away from the prop blast, so the pitot-static system gets a good reading of airspeed. So again, we'll just put a little bit of glue on the bottom of that tab. The tab is molded into the foam, the color's the same, and it goes right in there next to the servo there on the wing. And so I'll move that for you, get a little bit better shot. It's just right there, and it just fits right in there. Looks to me like it's going to be a real handy candidate to get knocked off as I'm moving it in and out of the car, but at least to start with, we'll have it in the right place. The last thing I have to do on the exterior of the model is to apply the decals. As I think I mentioned earlier, Dynam decals are really pretty nice. They're sticky, they're colorful, they adhere well, and most importantly, they come on a sheet that allows you to apply them. So if you're going to be doing any paint mods or what have you, you can do that without damaging the foam, ripping off the decals, and then finding yourself without decals. Now the way I like to do this, since these larger airplanes have larger decals, is as follows. I like to cut out the decal as close as I can from the sheet, and then there's they're die cut, and so the edges is going to come off like this from the decal itself, and just carefully remove that extra vinyl from around the decal so that you don't have to mess with it while you're down close to your model. Okay, I'll just discard that little piece. Now the other thing then I'll do is I'll fold back the backing just a little bit and peel up the decal like that, and then I'm going to cut the backing. So what that does is it gives me some of the stickiness right here, so I can position the decal where I want it and then stick it down without it rolling up on itself and ruining the decal. So the drawing shows it just a little bit past this forward panel line, and so I've got it where I want it. It's not on top of that little pitot tube we just put on, and so I'm going to lay the decal down and then stick that front sticky part down, and now it's in good shape. It's not going to go anywhere. So I can just fold it over and just kind of walk it back using my thumb to keep the decal smooth. As I pull it back, apply some pressure, and now I've got the decal on nice and smooth. It didn't roll up on itself, it didn't turn into a mess, and it's easy to do. Now the long ones that are going to go along the side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And the key to being successful on these decals is just to take your time, go slow. There's no rush. You're almost done, so don't mess it up now. Now the last thing we really need to look at is what's going on inside the cockpit. Not going to spend a lot of time on this simply because your receiver and the things that you put into your electronics package may differ than what I have. But you can see I have the wires from the servo and then the wires coming up through those Y connectors in the wings plugged into a little orange brand receiver. And then I've got the satellite part of the receiver mounted over here on the sidewall, so I've got the antennas from those two receivers oriented differently so that I try to get my best signal coverage. You've got the banana plugs coming from the ESC. I've got a battery mounted up in here. It's going to push all the way forward, and then I'm going to have to check my center of gravity. Again, a banana plug here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, my intent was to put one of those 3-axis stabilizers in, so I've got a piece of Velcro on the bottom ready to do that, but I don't have that installed. I'm going to get it flying properly first, and then I'll mess with adding that in. If you've seen any of my other build videos, you'll also know that I tend to like to put in external BECs. I went to the old toolbox today and discovered that I didn't have one, so I've got one of those on order. If you wanted to see more about that, you can look at the third part of either my F4U Corsair build or my T28 build, and I'll go into a little more detail on how to wire up an external BEC, which I do like to do and will plan to do for this model too when those parts come in. But if you're flying it stock, it goes together really easy. Just mount your receiver, satellite if it has one, attach the wires to the appropriate channels, and you'll be good to go. Now the last thing we need to do is to put on the propeller. We've done all the interior work, got the servos done, got the radio programmed, and we want to do all of that with the propeller off. Simple safety. You know, you go in there and you reverse the wrong servo, or the radio gets knocked over, and then all of a sudden with the propeller on, you've either damaged the model, damaged the workshop, or damaged yourself. And so make putting the propeller on the last step in the process. Now it comes with a plastic spinner with a friction style collet. So we'll just take the bolt off this and apply it to the motor shaft. Then next comes the propeller. You notice the propeller's got some teeth on the back of it that just handily match the teeth on the front of the spinner. And so what we're going to do is put those on so that they fit in the teeth. Put the little black washer on. I got that here so you can see it on the nose. And then finish up with the bolt. So we've got the bolt here. Now what I'm going to do, because I've been working on trying to dry fit this a little bit before we film it, is put it on kind of soft, and then put the nose on to make sure that we've got the propeller in the proper teeth, so that this is all going to fit. And so as you can see right now, I'm off a little bit. So then it just makes it easy for me to loosen the propeller and then move it over a set of teeth, tighten it up a little bit, and then again put that was one set of teeth too much. See if that's a good place for it. And so we can get that in so the little ridges along here, in fact, will fit with the receptacle parts of the ridge on the propeller spinner hub right back here. With that done, then I'll go back and then tighten this down with a wrench, and then finish up with these narrow screws and pop them in through the front of the spinner so that everything holds up nice. Okay, a couple of things to remember. One is when you put the screw on underneath the nose cone here, you want to put it on snug, but again, you're putting it against a plastic plate. And so don't over tighten it, because you run the risk of deforming the plastic plate, which makes it hard to put the nose cone on. The other thing is, remember, the screws that you're putting in here are going into plastic, and they're just holding the nose cone on. They're not holding the propeller on, and so you don't have to cinch those down just so terribly tight and run the risk of stripping out the little peg on the inside where the screw is mounting. So as you can see, it looks pretty nice. Now, the last thing I want to point out to you, and it kind of falls into the category of modifications, is that with these canopy hatches, or these fuselage hatches that cover all the electronics inside the model, one of the things I like to do is to put some little nubs here so that when I lift it up, I'm not putting all that pressure on the foam itself. I'm putting the pressure on the little nub. Let me show you how I do that. You can raise up and it just picks right off. I take a popsicle stick and I cut it about 1/8 of an inch larger than the span from one side of the hatch to the other. In this case, I mixed up a little more of the paint that I used on the canopy and dabbed a little paint on that, and then used my hobby knife and just cut out a little ridge on each side that is a little bit deeper than the popsicle stick itself, and then glued it in, which allows me then to have these two very small little nubs here, which then in turn allows me to have easy access to the hatch without putting a lot of pressure on the foam. Eventually your dirty hands and the pressure on the foam is going to start to fatigue the foam and to make it dirty, and so a way to prevent that and give this area a little longer life and a better appearance is to put those little nubs on there, which allows you to easily remove the hatch. So something you may want to consider as you finish up your model. Let's take this outside for a minute and do a quick video walk around. And now for just a couple of closing comments. The airplane came through the shipping process well. The parts were well packed and everything went together really very easily. It's modeled after an actual airplane that you can find photographs of on Google Images, which gives you some confidence that you're flying an airplane that looks the way it really did. A couple of things that I've talked about during the video that you might want to consider is adding the gray paint along the canopy line here so it's not a big green square on the back. The little nubs over here to help you with getting the canopy on and off would also be a good idea. Now, a couple of little things here that I'll call out to your attention. When I put the empennage on, I found some fingerprints right here. So somebody had some gray paint on their fingers when they picked up this part. But again, a little craft paint, a couple of dabs of black to darken it because it wasn't quite the right shade. And I was able to paint this green blotch of green camouflage without any trouble. And I suspect that if I didn't point it out to anyone, they wouldn't know the difference because the match is very good and there's a space of gray around it, so you're not going to see it. The other thing that I wanted to point out was that the wings, especially the wing roots, were not molded as crisply as some Dynam models have been, which meant that there was some gapping when I put the wings together. So it may be worth a few minutes with your sanding block to square up the wing roots down here so that when you put the wings together, you've got a nice seal. I wasn't as happy about that. It's not as big a deal because this model comes with a spar that spans both wings, but it wasn't up to the usual standards that I come to expect from the molding from a Dynam model. And then last but not least, one of the gaps for the propeller here was just a little off. So again, another minute or two with a piece of sandpaper allowed me to open up that prop opening just less than 1 millimeter to allow the prop to fit in and for the little grooves and the little tabs on the nose to come together when I screwed it together here just a couple of minutes ago. So all in all, it looks really nice. I'm looking forward to flying it. I need to do a couple things yet. One, I'm going to be measuring the control throws, making adjustments with my radio if necessary, and then I'm going to be validating the center of gravity. The center of gravity on this is marked to be 55 to 60 millimeters back from the leading edge. That puts it right over the wheel, and so some of the comments about the airplane being easy to nose over make sense because of the position of that center of gravity. When I put the battery in this one and flipped it over, it bounced at about 70 millimeters, so I'm going to go back and listen to some of the other folks' comments on CG placement to see if that slightly aft CG might not work better, not only for ground handling, but for stability in the air as well. So I hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you next time.